Hello and welcome to Cannon County High School Algebra 2. Yesterday we talked about how to graph the sine and cosine functions. Today we're going to begin learning how to eventually be able to solve equations involving sine, cosine, and tangent. And in order to do that, we need to be able to find the inverses of sine, cosine, and tangent. So we're going to do that mostly on the computer, and this is going to be a much shorter video than yesterday. Mr. Lyon, I'm going to ask you to sit over here again and keep an eye on us, make sure we don't make any mistakes. Here's what we're doing today. We're finding the inverses of the sine, cosine, and tangent function, and I'm going to be, when you see me on the computer here, it's going to be IXL y.10. That's what we're going to be working on. So here's what you already know how to do. If I said to you, what's the cosine of 30 degrees? Well, you would take out your cheat sheet. You probably don't even need it anymore because you probably have these memorized. But the cosine of 30 degrees is going to be the square root of 3 over 2. Okay, today what we're going to do is inverse cosine. The notation for that is a cosine with a little exponent of -1. If you look at your calculator, you will see that when you look at the sine, the second function of the sine button says sine raised to the -1 power. That just means the inverse sine. So that's what you use when you know the sine, but you want to find the angle. So that's what we're going to be doing. The opposite or inverse of this equation is this one. The inverse cosine of the square root of 3 over 2 is 30 degrees. So if you know what the cosine is, you can get the angle by taking the inverse cosine, or the inverse sine, or the inverse tangent. And the calculator has all these programmed into them to make it easier for you, okay? Two things to be careful of when you're doing this IXL, and that is to make sure that your calculator is in the right mode, degrees versus radians. So look at what they're doing, because they'll switch between degrees and radians, and if you're in the wrong mode, obviously you're going to get the wrong answer. The other thing to be careful of is sometimes they ask you to round to the nearest thousandth, sometimes they ask you to round to the nearest hundredth, sometimes they want the answer in simple radical form. Just make sure you look at the directions before you get started, okay? So let's try a few of these. The ones that are in simplest radical form, we're going to use our brains for. The ones that are decimals, we're going to use the calculator for. So, oops. Slid off there. I'm going to just zoom in just a little so you can see this. Hopefully that shows up. That's zoomed in a little too much. And if I do it any more than that, there we go. Okay, this one says theta is an acute angle. Find the value of theta in degrees. The sine of theta is the square root of 2 over 2. Okay, well, I'm going to use our cheat sheet for that one because this is in simplest radical form. So look at your cheat sheet. Again, you probably don't even need it by now. But which of these angles has a sine that's the square root of 2 over 2? Well, let's see. The sine is the y coordinate. And it looks like that one right there, 45 degrees, is the angle that we're looking for. And it says to put it in degrees. If it would have said radians, we would have said pi over 4. But this is degrees, so we're going to say 45 degrees and hit submit, and that's it. The sine of theta equals the square root of 3 over 2. Well, again, looking at our cheat sheet here, the sine, which is the y coordinate, square root of 3 over 2, it looks like that one right there, that 60-degree angle. You see how easy this is? And that's why this is going to be a short video. But it's really important that you know how to find these, whether or not they are in simple radical form or whether you have to use your calculator to do those. All right, what do you think about this one? Cosine of theta equals the square root of 2 over 2. What's the answer? That's right, it's 45 degrees. And since they're asking for degrees, what if they would have been asking for radians? Pi over 4, exactly. But they're asking for degrees, so this is 45 degrees, and that's it. Okay? Theta is an acute angle. Find the value of theta in radians. Okay, this time they want radians. The tangent of theta equals 1. Now on our cheat sheet, we did not write tangents anywhere, but which of these would give you a tangent of 1? Well, let's do a little bit of thinking on this for a minute. If the tangent of theta is equal to 1, which of the angles, when you take, you know that tangent is really equal to the sine divided by the cosine. Which of these, when you take the sine divided by the cosine, will give you 1? Well, that means that the sine and the cosine have to be the same thing. So which of these will do that? Well, it looks like 45 degrees, the sine and the cosine are the same. So it would be 45 degrees. And that's the right answer, but you got to be careful because in this problem it said radians. So what's 45 degrees in radians? That's right, it's pi over 4. So how do we do that? Well, we got to make a fraction. Put pi in the numerator. Put 4 in the denominator. And that's it. Okay, so you get the idea. Let's skip up a level and see what it's going to ask us to do. I think we're going to get some problems where we have to use our calculator. Here we go. Theta is an acute angle. Find the value of theta in degrees. Well, this time it says the tangent of theta is 1.4. So I'm going to be using my calculator. Notice it says find the value of theta in degrees. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the mode button on the calculator and check to see if I'm in degrees or not. And I am. If it wasn't in degrees, if it was in radians, I would change it to degrees. So just make sure you're in the correct mode before you start. So in order to do this on the calculator, this is inverse tangent. We want to take the inverse tangent of 1.4. So I'm going to hit the second button and then the tangent button, and you'll see that that gives me the inverse tangent of, and I'm going to type in 1.4. Since I'm in degrees, it's going to give me the answer. That means, oops, there it is. It's a 54.46. Now, again, we got to be careful. This one says round to the nearest hundredth, so just be careful what you round to, because sometimes I've noticed it says hundredth, sometimes thousandth. So this would be 54.46. 54.46. Okay? The cosine, let's see. Theta is an acute angle. Find the value of theta in degrees. So I'm still in degrees, that's good. Cosine. So this time we're going to take the inverse cosine of 0.9. So just like before, you're going to hit second cosine. That gives me the inverse cosine of 0.9. And now it says it's 25.84. Are we going to the nearest hundredth? We are. Okay. So 25.84. So you see, this is not difficult. It's just a matter of knowing how to use your calculator correctly. Let's see, find the value of theta in radians. The cosine of theta equals -1. This time they want radians. Now, we could do this on the calculator, and well, let's do it both ways. Let's do it on the calculator. Let's do it using our cheat sheet first. Which of these angles has a cosine of -1? Well, none of them do. The cosine is the x coordinate. But you know that on the unit circle, if I were to draw a unit circle here, where do you get an x-coordinate of -1? Right there. You get it at 180 degrees, which is the same as pi. So the answer to this one, if they want to know what angle has a cosine of -1, and it says the answer has to be between 0 and pi. Well, we just figured out that it's going to be pi. Could we have figured it out on the calculator? Kind of. First of all, you'd have to make sure that you're in radians. So I'm going to do that first. Go up to radians, highlight that. All right, what is the inverse cosine of -1? It says 3.14159, which you should recognize as being pi. So this one, it says, now a better answer would be pi, but this says round to the nearest hundredth, so that's what we're going to do. And since we know that it's pi, that means it's 3.14, and that's it. Okay? You get the idea? Let's do just one more. What's the okay, we want the sine of theta is -0.2. Let's see, this one's in radians. So again, am I in radians? Yes, I am. This will be our last one. The inverse sine of -0.2. The inverse sine of negative 0.2. And I'm in radians, so this is negative 0.20. Let's see, it says round to the hundredth. So negative 0.20 is the right answer. Negative 0.20. And I do want to include that 0 because it says round to the nearest hundredth. Okay? So really that's it. I'd like you to try this on your own. Try some of these problems from y.10. And this will help us because we are going to be solving equations where you want to find the angles. And this is kind of step one in order to do that. This is kind of like in Algebra 1 when you were first learning how to do one-step equations before you got to the 2- and 3-step equations. And that's really all we're doing here. So try a few of them. Try to get this up to 80%. We're already up to 64. It just is a good way for you to get ready for what we're doing next. So, thanks for watching. Tune in tomorrow, and I will talk to you then. Bye.